Yeah, how do you handle people who just don't get it?
Yeah.
And this goes to what I was talking about regarding frustration. I am frustrated by people who refuse to argue honestly, who want to just move on to the next argument and not acknowledge that their initial point had been refuted. People who constantly repeat, they're just not grasping that I've come up with something that refutes their argument. They just move on to another analogy that's the same as the one before.
Yeah, there's a moving target.
It drives me crazy.
Tactic.
And on occasion, perhaps on too many occasions, perhaps not, I'll just tell them they're an idiot and hang up. Now, the problem with this is that people don't. I don't realize, or don't always. I'm not always aware that people don't know me as well as I know me, and obviously, when I reach that point where I'm going to hang up and you're an idiot, I'm not telling them that idiot or moron is the sum total of what I think about them and everything they believe. I'm saying within the context of that argument, they're being an idiot. And oh, by the way, I'm not immune to that. I've been an idiot and a moron and a buffoon many, many times. The difference is that I seem to actually care about whether or not I'm being an idiot and a moron. And when somebody identifies that and says you're being an idiot, my immediate reaction is to go figure out why are they identifying me as an idiot. We got Hal from Manchester. How are you?
How you doing?
Good.
And I kind of described what I wanted to do to your guy a little wrong. My argument is about Chinese symbols and how they. I don't want to say they prove Genesis, but I want to say like it's evidence of a common source.
Okay, so you're claiming that the Chinese symbols predate the Bible and were influencing the Bible? Is that where you're going?
No, I'm saying like that's I'm at a loss of words here. I'm not really sure how to explain this.
I think I can help you. I think I can help you. Chinese.
I'll just go over it with you, and you'll get what I'm saying, I guess.
I think I already know what you're saying. Chinese characters are made up of a bunch of different symbols. It's not a phonetic language like English or an alphabet like that. It's a bunch of pictures that symbolize other things. And so there are people who say, if you look at, for example, the Chinese character for devil, it includes sub-characters within that character that are like garden and tempter and that type of stuff. And I know the Answers in Genesis site has this up there saying that this demonstrates that these 4,000-year-old characters, that people in China were aware of the creation story. Is that what your point was?
They were aware of the Jewish creation story, you're saying?
Yeah, that's the argument, that the nature of these characters for the word for devil is such that the person who created that character was aware of the Jewish creation story. Is that?
Okay, yeah, okay. Okay, I kind of misinterpreted what you were saying at first. Okay, but
so this is a question to you. Is this what you were talking about?
That's what you were talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what? I mean, there's three possible.
I just think it's interesting.
There's three possible explanations. Either somebody who invented that character in the ancient Chinese writings was familiar with the Jewish creation myth and wanted to pass that along. That kind of makes sense, that you make a character that relates to the story. That's kind of the way Chinese works, although I'm not an expert. So that's one possibility, that the person who created that character was familiar with those stories. The other possibility is that people are seeing patterns in those characters, and that Chinese language in particular lends itself to finding patterns of words and other words. I'd say that that's also viable, considering that you can walk into any marketing department in China, and what they end up doing is twisting and turning their characters into new fonts so that you portray more message and people read more into it than what the actual character's for. And the third possibility is that the Genesis account, the Jewish creation myth, is true, and that the God of the Jews decided to reveal this to a Chinese guy as well. Now, of the three, which is the least likely?
You see, now, if you ask me, the last option is the most likely, because
why?
This is going along with ancient Chinese, and these symbols supposedly predate any Jewish civilization.
Well, how is that possible? Doesn't that contradict your Bible, Wasn't the Jewish civilization the
Well,
first?
no, the Jewish civilization didn't always exist. That's something that came along
my
a while
next
after.
No,
the
no, no.
creation.
My next question
Hang-
would be okay, if somehow this creation story influenced China somehow, ancient China, what else you got except a character?
No, we don't go do an okay and go on to that.
No, okay. Go
The
ahead, Matt.
reason is you're saying that it's more likely of those three possibilities that a God did it, and then you're saying that it's because the character predates Jewish culture. Well, that's in direct violation with what the Bible has to say. I mean, Adam and Eve, the formation.
This is what I'm saying. The Hebrews did not exist at the
So
first time
what?
of creation.
So what?
They exist.
So what?
I'm
The
saying
story did.
It's a little coincidental that the Chinese characters existed before the Jews even existed.
No, okay. I apologize, Hal. You're being an idiot about this, and here's why. The story existed. If the story was true or not, the story existed. Are you saying that the story didn't exist for the Hebrews until after the Chinese invented the character? How is that possible?
That's what
if
I've
it's
heard, is that these characters existed before the Hebrews came along and
okay? Let's think for a second.
Wrote down their stories.
Let's think for a second. If the Chinese character existed before the story existed, then clearly the story can't be true. Because if the story is true, then this is the story that was passed along from father to son, from Adam all the way to Moses. Now, those two things are in direct contradiction. Either this story existed within the zeitgeist of Hebrew culture before the nation of Jews became extant, or it did not. And if it did, then it's no surprise that a Chinese person might have found out about it and created a character. And if it didn't, then it's irrelevant that China has a character for this.
Well, you see,
It's
this
reductive.
This is the point I'm getting at, though, right here, is that the Chinese, even though they were an isolated civilization from the Hebrews and stuff, and they existed before the Hebrews, and these characters were in existence before the stories came up. And what I'm saying is, though, is that they were already aware of the creation account.
So the Chinese existed before the Hebrews, and they were aware of God's creation of the Hebrews.
Of the whole world.
Well, but oh wow. All right, let me backtrack.
The Hebrews weren't the only people that God created.
Wow. Let me backtrack, because what I tried to demonstrate is called a reductio ad absurdum, that you take the premises as granted and you demonstrate that they lead to a contradiction. And your premises were such that the Chinese character for devil, for example, predates Jewish culture. Right?
Yes.
How is that possible? If the Bible is true, the formation of a Hebrew nation comes afterwards, but the story of the creation follows those characters from Adam through Moses. It doesn't matter that we hadn't put a label on a Hebrew culture yet. If the Bible story... What?
Okay, I'll let you finish.
If the Bible story is true, which is what you're arguing by saying that the Chinese knew about it before the Hebrews, then that is self-refuting, because the Hebrews would have known the whole time. It doesn't matter what they were called. From Adam to Moses, this is a tradition.
He seems to be saying the story predates Adam, which is crazy, right? Did Adam know the story?
Did Adam?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Did Adam's children know the story?
I'm sorry, did Adam what?
Did Adam's children know the story?
Yes.
And we're all descended from Adam's, including both the Chinese and the Hebrews, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how could the Chinese story predate the reality that it's coming from, that you're arguing for?
Well, you see, this is what I'm saying. Sure, I mean the Hebrews weren't aware of it, before Moses, but the Chinese, though, they had kept the story going, and they eventually lost it again.
Okay.
Supposedly Moses was a descendant of Adam.
They recorded it through their symbols.
Okay. So one of the descendants of Adam and Eve eventually became Chinese, remembered the story and taught it to maybe, let's say, the Egyptians, who then taught it to Moses, and then Moses wrote it down, and then it became the story of the Jews.
Well, did the I mean, I don't know about that. Did the Chinese ever encounter the Egyptians?
Well, I don't know.
And all of this is
Wouldn't
more
that be
likely
something-
than a mind game?
Yeah, all of the, you know, you're saying that the mere fact that this Chinese character, which kind of maps to a character in the Jewish stories, predates the earliest Jewish record of these stories, means that it's more likely that a god revealed all of this to the Chinese. And you're doing this despite the fact that this god in the story somehow didn't choose the Chinese as his chosen people.
Well, the Chinese at back in those days just pretty much still carried on the story, but among the Hebrew people, they lost it. But then you can read like Exodus and stuff, and that's when they become God's chosen people.
And you think that's all more likely than the other two options?
I do. I just find it too coincidental.
Oh, so your argument, okay, because when I started the show, my primary question was, do you care whether or not what you believe is true? And you're claiming that you do care, but your argument is that this is too coincidental. It's too unlikely to have happened any other way than by divine intervention. And I wonder by what criteria you have made a determination that divine intervention is the best explanation, other than your own befuddlement at other possibilities.
I'm basing this all on the assumption that the ancient Chinese were isolated from the Middle Eastern and Semitic cultures. Now, if somebody comes up to me and shows me that they did encounter each other before these symbols were created, then I'll accept that right there. But just like I said, right now I'm assuming
the story you're accepting necessarily draws that conclusion. Let me break this down for you. You just said if somebody demonstrates evidence that the Chinese came into contact with them prior to then. And let's start at Adam, because we're accepting your story as true, and then it branches down, which means they've always been connected. They are all the result of the same tree.
Well, yeah. I'm saying, but after all that, like before the symbols were created, and people can show just not like by biblical accounts.
Basically, you have no clue what you're talking about, but you evaluated three prospects and concluded that a divine intervention is more likely than human error, or that one guy met another guy and wanted to pass on his creation myth. Really?
Well,
now you're shifting now you're shifting the burden of proof, because now you have convinced yourself that that answer is likely, and you won't change your mind until somebody shows you evidence that absolutely contradicts it. And you don't think that that is a dishonest argument?
I've looked this stuff up, and I haven't found anything about the Chinese encountering.
Well, that's an argument from laziness.
Yeah, I mean, you've taken argument from incredulity to argument from laziness. You haven't found anything, therefore you're shifting the burden of proof to other people. You haven't established.
I'm really not trying to shift the burden of proof to anybody.
You did.
Said I personally wasn't able to find anything. I'm open to being proven wrong.
I
wasn't personally able to find anything. But
that's a shifting of the burden of proof. To say that you're open to being proven wrong, and that as soon as somebody presents you with evidence that contradicts it, that's a shifting of the burden of proof. The only justifiable position you're in at this point is to say, I have no idea whether or not this is sufficient
evidence.
That's
the most honest thing to say.
To say that, divine intervention is the best explanation, but yet you have managed to conclude the exact opposite. That it's more likely that the stories, these grand supernatural stories are true, and that this God somehow preserved this story through one lineage, than that some person met another person and told stories. Something that we know has happened all the time since the beginning of our ability to talk. And yet you've concluded that it's more likely that there is a God who intervened. And I don't understand how you can defend that. That's like saying, I know my mom has done my laundry every week in my entire life, but I believe that the clothes that are folded and sitting on my bed are from sky pixies who came in and scrubbed them last night. That is the absurdity of what you're saying. And it's more possible, and until somebody shows me proof that my mom actually did the laundry, I'm going to keep on believing about the laundry pixies.
Well, all I can really say is, I mean, I can only repeat what I've already just said. I mean,
Which would be a really bad idea.
Yeah.
Like I said, I personally find it coincidental
Yeah, me too.
that these things, and I say the common source goes all the way back to Adam. But if somebody can, like I said, if somebody can actually show me that the common source was long, like after that, you know, I don't know, just something that doesn't agree with a biblical history.
Yeah.
Then
So you bought into something you like, and until somebody shows you different, you're going to cling to it.
I think the point to make here is that often the most honest and honorable answer is to say you don't know, and use that as a kind of a kick in the butt to say, well, I'm going to go learn more, and I'm going to hopefully, you know, make decisions based on good evidence and that sort of thing. If I care about it enough, if it matters, then go forward and learn. But it's generally dishonest to pick an answer and then try to, you know, conduct some sort of horse race where you're racing the answer you like the most against other answers. It's better to withhold your belief until you have proper evidence.
I'd really like to get to the core of it, because this baffles me. This goes back to the, you know, do you care whether or not your beliefs are true, which I'm going to end up repeating a lot. I'd like to find out how it is that a reasonably intelligent person can look at all this and say, wow, I just can't believe that this happened any other way than some mystical, supernatural convergence of events type thing.
Well, it could be ignorance about,
I mean,
you know, the fact that we see patterns in things. We are
But he's
programmed.
denying that. He's saying that our propensity to see patterns is less likely than that this pattern is true. I don't understand how anybody can say that they care whether or not something's true, be presented with all of this information, and then say, I think it's more likely that the story is true and a God did it. I mean, that is such a perversion of reasoning to me that I cannot possibly grasp it. It is as absurd as
maybe
thinking
God
that,
does everything.
that fairies have done your laundry. It is, and it's, by the way, it's special pleading, because you could be presented with 1,000 other coincidences like that from hundreds of other religions, and your criteria for determining whether or not something is true would force you to accept all of them. How do you deal with that?
Can you give me an example of something like that?
Off the top of my head, I'm not going to give you another example, because I don't find this one particularly compelling. I mean, why? Okay, list any of the similarities between, for example, Jesus and the hundreds of other messianic claims, or the you know, Athanasius or not Athanasius, Apollonius, or the similarities between. There are stories that have those similarities. You have not heard of any of those?
Well, I mean, I have heard of Apollonius. I remember watching this National Geographic special on him.
So what reason would you have for rejecting either the Apollonius stories or the Jesus stories?
Well, I have my personal reasons for believing.
Yeah, okay,
I mean,
we're done. We're done, Hal.
To be convinced by it.
We're done.
But,
We're done, because you won't argue honestly. You just went straight to, oh, I have my personal reasons, which tells me you don't give a damn about whether or not something's true. And we've already tried over and over again.
It's just that it's a long story, and I don't think you guys really want to waste all your time listening to it.
Probably not. I'm interested in actual truth, and somebody who can actually demonstrate truth. And I don't think that your story is going to get there if you began by talking about Chinese characters and how it's so unlikely that these Chinese characters could have come about by any other reason than that the story is true and that God dictated or influenced the Chinese people with the Jewish creation myth. I mean,
well, if I can find evidence in support of another theory, this is the one I'm going to default to for now.
Oh, now we get to the crux. You're saying, I'm going to accept this until I find better evidence of something else.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you not see the problem with that?
No, because I think the circumstantial evidence in support of this is pretty sufficient for now.
I'll tell you the problem with that. I'm going to accept that lightning bolts come from Zeus until I find out better information. I'm going to accept that bumps on people's foreheads tell me what's going on inside their heads until I get better information. I'm going to accept that diseases are caused by demons and devils and we need to engage in bloodletting until I find better information. The problem is that you've accepted an answer without sufficient evidence, and you're willing to be wrong about it while running around thinking you're right, and that makes you an idiot. That means that you don't care about what's actually true. You care about assuaging your discomfort with not knowing. You are so uncomfortable by not having an answer that you're willing to latch on to whatever seems most intuitively reasonable to you and comforts you. And that's not a pathway to truth at all.
I personally don't see a problem in
I know.
just assuming one answer is true until evidence is presented to suggest otherwise.
Yeah. I know you don't, and I don't know why you don't. And I wish I could find out, because we could fix the whole world as soon as we figure out why you don't. I can't explain it. I can't explain
all over
it.
the place do the same thing.
What?
Scientists all
No,
over
they
the place
don't.
do the same thing.
No, they freaking don't. Do not
Well,
pretend.
one huge example
Hal?
is the origin of the Big Bang.
Hal?
A lot of scientists will say the
Shut the
multiverse
fuck
is
up,
the origin
Hal.
of the Big
Let me
Bang, even
finish.
though there's no evidence of a multiverse.
Hal,
You're
do
on
not
hold.
pretend that what you're doing is even remotely comparable to science. Science doesn't just latch on to whatever feels good and then hopes maybe later on we'll find the truth. Science gives explanations and doesn't assert absolute certainty at any point. And what they do is they give the best explanation that is supported by evidence, that is subject to peer review. They build models that actually make testable predictions that prove useful. You're not doing anything remotely like that. And the fact that you have deluded yourself to thinking that science does this too is absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. You not only don't care whether or not something's true, you have poisoned your own mind to the extent that you have no pathway to understanding how to find out if something's true. And the one thing that can be used to get us as close as possible to a true understanding, you denigrate it to being the equivalent of the asinine guesswork burden shifting thing that you've just engaged in. We're done, Hal. Completely. We're moving on. Science just guesses until it finds a new answer.
No.
Sorry.
Science follows where the evidence leads, and there's human error in science, but it gets corrected over time. It is a in the long term, it's a reliable way of finding answers about the world.
There's no assertion of absolute certainty in science.
No.
There's
And the
no
testable
assertion
claims
that
thing is
scientists
very
aren't
important, right?
fallible.
Because it says, okay, I got a theory, it makes this testable claim, and it could be proven wrong tomorrow, right? These theories are very vulnerable in the sense that any evidence that counteracts it makes that theory false.
Yeah.
And it's those theories that go through this running the gauntlet of all these tests that emerge at the end as the most likely thing, and making testable claims is awesome. It's a very high standard of being tested against the real world.
Hal's
And
convinced himself that he's being open-minded. And I see this all the time, especially from the pseudoscientific woo-woo, crowd, that they're being open-minded, that, well, we haven't completely disproven homeopathy, so I might as well engage in it, and,
Right.
science doesn't done any better. My ass, my aching ass.
Yeah.
How dare you?
And hopping on one sort of theory or pet answer for something is kind of, your laziness ends up becoming part of the equation, in the sense that if you start with a situation where I say I don't know, then I'm not making any decisions based on false.
Yeah.
But if you start with the decision, oh, my little pet answer is the right one, and I'm going to be lazy and not investigate it further, then you go through life making decisions based on this false thing, and your decisions affect you and other people, and that's where the problem is. Yeah. You can believe whatever you want, but once it starts affecting other people, then you're doing them harm.
Yeah, I thought I hit it nice and hard when I said,
Yeah.
the issue of, for example, I'm going to believe that this causes diseases and bloodletting is the solution. And then immediately after saying that, it was like, well, I don't see the harm in believing whatever until how can you not see the harm there? There's something that goes on in the mind of many theists, many religious supporters, not all. I'm not going to necessarily paint everybody with one brush, but in the mind of people who have engaged in pseudoscientific nonsense and woo and religion, etc. And it's an error that I was prone to, that I think almost any believer would be. I have no idea exactly what it is. I've tried I don't know how many different ways to find it. And we're beginning again with this, do you care whether or not your beliefs are true? And of course, everybody is going to answer yes, or almost everybody's going to answer yes to that question. You know, of course I care. And then, for whatever reason, when you attempt to demonstrate that they haven't followed the rigorous standards by which we would normally determine whether or not something's true, they don't see it.
Yeah.
And I think Howell was a perfect example, because he's convinced himself that his approach is as scientific as any other. Mm-hmm. And it's not.
No.
I mean, you know,
No.
it's like, you know, rolling a ball around the table and then claiming that, you know, it's just as good as juggling 5 broken glasses. It's, you know, it's not the same.
Yeah.
You're apples and oranges.
Well,
And that was a
again, you
horrible
know, the
example that nobody
honorable
needs to
thing
ever
is to
post.
say you don't know, and find and do the due diligence and find out the best answer based on evidence.
The content of this video is produced by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. If you enjoyed this content and are willing and able to provide a donation, please visit the website below.